Some games become classics because they've got or they tell unforgettable stories. Other games become pretty good because they push technology further than anyone thought was possible. Then there are of course games that earn their place in history simply because every second feels alive. The action never stops slowing down, the animation never stops impressing, and every explosion, somehow carries enough personality to make players smile instead of just simply watching another enemy disappear. Those are the games people continue returning to decades later because they understand something remarkably simple. Fun never goes out of style. That perfectly describes the original Metal Slug. See, when it arrived in arcades for the Neo Geo in 1996, it was developed by Nazca Corporation, published by SNK. It sort of immediately separated itself from every other run-and-gun shooting game of its generation. At first glance, it looked like another fast-paced military action game filled with just soldiers, tanks, helicopters and stuff. And after only just a few minutes, however, everybody realized they were experiencing something completely different. Every character moved with these astonishing details, vehicles bounced realistically across uneven terrain and stuff. Enemies reacted differently depending on how they were defeated, and backgrounds were all packed with these tiny little animations that most players wouldn't even notice until the second or third playthrough. And because of that, it wasn't simply just a great action game, it became one of the greatest showcases of handcrafted pixel art ever created. Now, nearly 30 years later, artists still study Metal Slug because of its extraordinary animation quality and the attention to detail. That reputation raises an interesting question, which is, what would happen if someone rebuilt the original Metal Slug from the ground up using modern technology, while also preserving everything that made the arcade classics unforgettable in the first place? So first of all, at the moment, no remake of the original Metal Slug has been officially announced. SNK continues expanding the franchise through projects like Metal Slug Tactics and Awakening, and the first arcade game has never received the complete modern remake many longtime fans continue imagining so far. The idea becomes more exciting the longer you think about it. Not because the original was aged poorly, quite the opposite actually, it still plays wonderfully good today. A remake wouldn't exist to repair something broken, it would just exist to celebrate one of the finest arcade games ever made while finally allowing its incredible artistic vision to grow without hardware limitations. Like imagine beginning the remake before the first shot's ever fired. Morning sunlight stretching onto a beautiful mountain valley and birds circle around distant forests, wind moving gently, and for a brief moment nothing suggests a war is taking place, then, something explodes and there's some aliens coming from the sky. So without saying much, it reminds players that beneath all the exaggerated action, Metal Slug still takes place inside a world worth protecting. The original arcade game naturally rushed players into combat within seconds because that matched the pace of arcade design during the 90s, so a remake could effort to breathe slightly longer without sacrificing momentum. The battlefield itself deserves extraordinary attention. One reason Metal Slug remains visually memorable is just because every stage introduced completely different environments. Dense forests that became deserts, deserts then became snowy mountains, underground military facilities gave way to ancient ruins and heavily fortified enemy bases. Every location felt distinct without interrupting the game's incredible pacing. Modern technology could preserve that structure while making every battlefield feel remarkably alive. The world never stops moving, even when players aren't looking directly at it, so the remake should remain faithful to this series' greatest strength: movement. Metal Slug has always controlled beautifully because every jump, every slide, every grenade throw, and every weapon swap happens exactly when players expect it to. Modern animations should enhance that responsiveness rather than replace it. Marco and Tarma shouldn't move like superheroes, they're elite soldiers, experienced, confident, and efficient. Every reload animation feels natural. Every landing carries a lot of convincing weight. Every sprint reflects years of just battlefield experience. Players never struggle against the controls, they simply react to it. Combat also naturally remains the centerpiece of the whole thing. One of the remarkable achievements of the original game was making complete chaos feel surprisingly readable. Hundreds of bullets, explosions, enemy soldiers, helicopters, tanks, and collapsing buildings filled the screen without becoming confusing because every animation communicated exactly what players needed to understand. So a remake should preserve that clarity above everything else. Visual effects become more detailed without overwhelming gameplay, explosions remain spectacular, enemy behavior grows smarter, difficulty then should reward observation rather than memorization alone. And of course, humor should remain absolutely untouched. That might sound surprising for a military action game, but of course Metal Slug's always balance explosive combat with these wonderfully absurd comedies. Captured prisoners enthusiastically reward players after rescue, soldiers all panic in exaggerated ways, strange creatures all unexpectedly coming and going through missions, and characters occasionally finding themselves transformed into mummies or inflated by strange gases and stuff. Those moments never interrupted the action. They gave the series its very unmistakable personality. God, especially the zombie thing. Without him, Metal Slug simply wouldn't feel like Metal Slug. And also, music deserves equal respect as well. The original soundtrack remains legendary because it perfectly combined military march, jazz influence, energetic rock, and this adventurous melody into one unforgettable collection of themes. Modern music and modern technology could take that and give it a richer recording quality. Community discussions surrounding the original Metal Slug consistently highlights one remarkable observation, that even decades later, players still consider it as one of the finest examples of 2D animation ever created. Artists, animators, and game developers frequently reference its handcrafted sprite work as an industry benchmark that remains difficult to surpass. Perhaps that's the greatest challenge any remake would face. Improving graphics isn't enough, since the original already possesses timeless artistic identity. So a remake must understand why every animation looked the way it did, why explosions felt satisfying, why enemy reactions made players smile, why rescuing prisoners became just as enjoyable as defeating the bosses. Those tiny details created the experience, not simply a higher resolution. For now though, the original Metal Slug continues standing exactly where it has been nearly 3 decades. One of the greatest arcade games ever created, untouched, unmatched, waiting for another generation of players to discover why its reputation has never faded. I mean, maybe one day SNK will decide that the first adventure deserves a complete modern remake, but with the same care, craftsmanship, whatever. Not because the classic needs replacing, because masterpieces deserve preservation. And sometimes just the best way to preserve something isn't simply making it playable again. It's allowing modern technology to reveal everything the original artists demanded of creating while remaining faithful to every frame that made players fall in love with it in the first place. And if that day ever comes, the result wouldn't simply be another nostalgic remake, it will become a celebration of one of gaming's finest examples of pure craftsmanship.